Hi everybody, it's Crystal. What's my yarny peeps up to? So today I'm going to show you how to make it could be a regular beanie or a slouchy beanie, and it works well for a man or a woman. Great gifts, or use it for yourself. As you can see, mine's more towards the slouchy side. I always say I don't look very good in slouchies, and but I've been trying to make them and trying to learn how to wear them a little bit better. Someone told me I needed to make them longer, so I tried that. I don't know. Gotta put them on top. Two different colors here. It's an intermediate pattern, but you know what? Beginners, you can do it. If you know the basic stitches, I'm gonna show you the rest. So, let's do this. Okay, so this hat measures. It would work well for a man or a woman. The palm I got off Amazon. It is a 5-inch palm, and I floofed it up with the hair dryer and brushed it a bit to get it floofy. But anyways, hair dryer works well too. This is meant to be a slouchy. It's about from top to bottom almost 12 inches. You can cut it shorter if you want to make it a regular size hat. And this should fit probably in between 21 and 23 inch head. As far as slouchy goes, I think that this is stretchy enough that, you know, it'll fit just fine. Yeah, like I said, man, woman, it looks cool. Let's go ahead and get started on it. For this project, the black that I use is the Premier Basix yarn. It is just a medium weight number 4. And it's 100% acrylic. There are 359 yards in this ball. This is what I use. Probably, if I had to guess, 120 yards, 25 yards of the black, that's a guess, of the main color. And then the multicolored yarn I use is called James C. Barrett Masquerade Chunky. I do not consider this a chunky yarn by US standards. I would say it is a 4-weight. You would probably agree with me. So any 4-weight yarn will work for any 4-weight yarn will work for either of those. And this one has 163 yards, and I probably used about 150 yards of that. Now this hat is taking a bit more yarn than normal because of the puff stitches. Now I would consider this like I said, intermediate. Beginners, try it out anyways. If you follow along, you'll probably be able to do it. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm starting with the black. And we're going to go ahead and work a slip knot. Place it on our hook. We're going to be working at the top of the hat down. So this is the top down hat. We're going to work a chain of 4. Now I'm going to slip stitch right back into my first stitch to form a ring. Now if you want to use the magic circle here, that is fine. So go ahead and slip stitch through there. Sorry, I gotta get my finger through the ring. There we go. Okay, and now we're going to chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch. And now we're going to be working through the center of this ring here, and we are going to work 12 double crochets. So we're going to yarn over, go into the ring, draw up a loop, and then go ahead and do our double crochet. And we want to do that 12 times, so that counted as number 1. There's 2, 3, 4. Right, so I've made it to the end of row 1 and I have 12 stitches. And I know they're hard to see because it's black. But the stitches I make in black will be easy. So, I have 12 stitches now. What I'm going to do is end by slip stitching into my first double crochet. Not the chain 1 that we did, but the first double crochet. That'll end round 1. And now if you pull your tail, you can close up that center circle a little bit more, and then at the end we can sew it up the rest of the way with that tail. Now we're going to start round 2. We are going to chain 1, which does not count as a stitch. Now we're going to work right here in the same little spot that we just slip stitched into, right there. And we're going to go right into that spot and work 2 double crochets. So there's 1 and 2. Now what we're going to do is we are going to work around and we're going to put 2 double crochets in every stitch all the way around for row 2. So 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 2 doubles into the next stitch, 2 doubles into the next stitch, all the way around until we get back to our starting point. Alright, I have made it to the end of round 2, and now you should have a total of 24 stitches. And we're going to end round 2 by slip stitching into our very first double crochet. Remember, not the chain one, but the double crochet. And that'll end round 2, 24 stitches. Now I'm going to change to my multicolored yarn. Now when I change colors, I tie off my yarn every time. Now if you don't change colors that way, that is fine. You can change colors however you normally do it. But for me, what I do is I always clip my yarn off, because otherwise my seam does not look correct if I don't do that. So I'm going to add my multicolored yarn now next. So I'm going to bring it in here. And I'm just going to start in that same stitch there that I just tied off in. If you look, you can see it right there. So I'm going to start my yarn there. So I'm going to go in and leave a little bit of a tail, and I'm going to pull my new yarn through, and I'm going to chain 1. Now I'm going to try to hide these tails, crochet them in as I go. So what we're going to do is a puffed V-stitch. So we are going to yarn over, go into that same stitch, draw up a loop, and we're going to do that 3 times. So that would be number 1. Yarn over, go into same stitch, draw up a loop. That's 2. One more time, yarn over, go into same stitch, draw up a loop. That was 3 times. And now you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 loops on your hook. Yarn over and go through all 7 loops. Don't drop them like I just did. That was embarrassing. Like that. And then we are going to chain 1. Now we're going to go back in the same stitch and do another puff stitch. So same stitch, yarn over, go in to the same stitch, draw up a loop 3 times. That was 1, yarn over, go in again, 2, yarn over, 1 more time, go in, that's 3, 7 loops on your hook, yarn over and go through all 7, chain 1, and there is your puffed V-stitch. Now we are going to skip the next stitch, and then we're going to puff V-stitch into the next. So skip 1, and in the next one we're going to do what we just did. So we're going to yarn over, skip this one, go into the next one, go in, draw up a loop. You want to do that 3 times. So that was 1, yarn over, go into the same stitch, that's 2, yarn over, go into the same stitch, that's 3, 7 loops on your hook, yarn over and go through all 7, chain 1. Again, we got to do it 1 more time into the same stitch. So we yarn over, same stitch, draw up a loop, that's 1 time, yarn over, 2 times, yarn over again, 3 times, 7 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through all 7, and chain 1. So there you can see that's our puff V stitches. So we're going to kind of repeat that pattern all the way around. So I'm going to skip 1 stitch, and in the next stitch I'm going to do my puffed V stitch. So I will skip 1, yarn over, go into the next stitch, draw up a loop, and I want to do that 3 times. So that was 1, 2, and 3, yarn over, go through all 7 loops, chain 1. Again, same stitch, yarn over, drop a loop, that's 1, 2, 3, yarn over, go through all 7 loops, and chain 1. So that is another puffed V-stitch there that we've done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue this pattern all the way around, skipping 1, puff V-stitch, skip 1, puff V-stitch, until I get back to my starting point. Alright, I have made it back around, and I just did my last puff V-stitch. I chained 1, I have 1 stitch left to skip, so I'm gonna go ahead and skip that. And I'm going to end by slip stitching kind of just right here in the side of my first puff stitch. It doesn't have to be exact, just kind of somewhere right there into the side of it. Or the top of it, just wherever you can find a place to slip stitch. And again, I'm going to tie off and change back to my black. So I always clip my yarn when I tie off with my doll scissors. Alright. And now at the end of round 3, you should have 12 of these puffed V-stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I do. Now I'm going to bring my black back in. And I'm going to do a row. Start row 4. Start anywhere you want. I'm actually going to start right here where we just slip stitched. Well, yeah, that's where I'm going to start. Start my yarn there. That way I can try to hide the tail as I go. So what I'm going to do, start my yarn in that same spot, and I'm going to chain 1, which does not count as a stitch. And I'm going to work a double crochet. We're on row 4 now, back into that same spot. And now I'm going to work a double crochet in the chain 1 space of the V-stitch. And then I'm going to work a double crochet in the top of the next puff, which is, here's your puff, here's the top of it, kind of right there. Just kind of go into that spot there and double crochet. And then I'm going to double crochet into this chain space right here. So you yarn over and just go right through the space. And I'm going to repeat that all the way around. So I'm going to do a double crochet into the top of the next puff. So kind of like right here on top of it, double crochet. Double crochet in the chain 1 space of the V. So right in there. Double crochet into the top, onto the top of the next puff. So pull it apart, you can see that little spot right there. And double crochet into the next chain space, which is right here between the puffs. Repeat that again. So double crochet in the top of the next puff, so you can kind of see that little spot. Just go right into it. Double crochet. Double crochet into the chain 1 space between the puffs of the V. Double crochet on top of the next puff. And then a double crochet into the chain 1 space between the puffs. So I'm going to continue that pattern of a double crochet on top of the puff stitch, of the first puff stitch right here, in the double crochet in the chain 1 space of the V, double crochet on top of the next puff stitch, and then double crochet in the chain space between the puff stitches. I'm going to repeat that all the way around until I get back to my starting point. Okay, I'm coming to the end of round 4. I did a double crochet into the top of my last puff. You want to make sure you double crochet into this last chain space here. Let's end the round by slip stitching into our first double crochet, and at the end of round 4 you should have a total of 48 stitches. So I'm going to switch colors again, so I'm going to go ahead and tie this off, and I'm going to bring in my multicolored yarn and start with that for round 5. Okay, so round 5 is going to be similar to, it's going to be the same thing as round 3, except for I'm going to start my yarn in a different spot. I'm going to find my first puff V stitch, which is right here. I'm going to start in the double crochet that was worked in the chain 1 space of the puff V stitch. So here's my puff V stitch, here's the chain, or here's the double crochet. So that's where I'm going to start my yarn. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and work the puff V stitches like I did on round 3. I'm going to pull my yarn through and chain 1, and then I'm going to go ahead and do my puff V stitch into that stitch. There's chain 1, skip 1, puff V into the next. So I'm skipping this one, going into the next one, work on my puff V stitch, chain 1, skip 1, and puff V into the next. Chain 1, skip 1, puff V into the next. Chain 1, skip 1, puff V into the next. So this is the pattern I'm going to repeat for round 5 all the way around until I get back to my starting point. And if you look closely at your puff V's, you have one that's lined up with row 3 and one that's in between the puff V's. If that helps you determine where, make sure you're putting them in the right spot. But anyways, I'm going to keep repeating this pattern, which is the same as round 3, all the way until I get to the end of the row. All right, I've come to the end of round 5. You should have 24 puffed V stitches. Make sure you chain 1 after your last one. You should have 1 stitch to skip. Go ahead and end by slip stitching into the top of your first puff stitch. And I'm going to tie this off, and I'm going to switch back to my black. Alrighty, we're going to start round 6 now. Round 6. We're going to start our black in the same spot that I just slip stitched into. So, right there. Now we're going to do this one just a little bit differently. We're going to go through chain 1. As soon as I get my tails aligned up here. Okay. All right. Now, chain 1, which does not count as a stitch. Now we're going to go into that same spot and double crochet into the top of that puff that we just started into. Then we're going to double crochet into the middle of the V. and then we're going to double crochet into the next puff stitch right here. And now what we're going to do, here's where it's going to be a little bit different. We are not going to double crochet into the chain 1 space between the puffs. We're just going to jump to the next puff stitch and double crochet on top of it. Like that. So we just kind of skipped over that chain space there. Double crochet into the chain space of the V. Double crochet into the top of the next puff. Double crochet, skip this right here, jump over to the next V stitch, double crochet into the top of the next puff, double crochet into the chain 1 of the V stitch, double crochet into the top of the next puff, skip this chain 1 space and jump over to the next puff and double crochet into it, double crochet into the chain 1 space of the next V, and double crochet into the next puff. Skip this chain 1 space and repeat. So we're just basically double crocheting on the top of every puff stitch and the chain 1 space of the puff V stitch, and we're skipping over this chain space here. We're not doing anything there between the V's. So I'm going to repeat this pattern all the way around until I get back to my starting point. Okay, I have come to the end of round 6. You should have 72 stitches now. Now what we're going to do for round 7 is we're going to do a decrease round. So we're going to take these 72 stitches that we have and we're going to knock it down to 60. So what we're going to do is go ahead and end round 6 by slip stitching into our first double crochet. We are not going to change colors. What we're going to do is a row of single crochet with some decreases for round 7. So we are going to chain 1. What we want to do is 4 single crochets in a row and then a single crochet decrease. Okay, so we're going to go right back into this very first stitch here that we slip stitched into and do a single crochet. So that counts as number 1. We need to do 4 in a row. That was 1. Go to the next one. 2, the next one, 3, the next one is 4. Now we're going to do a single crochet decrease, and that is worked over 2 stitches. So we're going to go into the next double crochet and draw up a loop, and then we're going to go into the next one and draw up a loop. 3 loops on your hook. We're going to yarn over and go through all 3. That took 2 stitches and made it into 1. Now we're going to repeat that process all the way around. So 1 single crochet into the next 4 stitches. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4, and then we'll single crochet decrease over the next 2. So we go into the next one and draw up a loop, and then the next one and draw up a loop, yarn over and go through all 3. Again, 1 single crochet into the next 4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and single crochet decrease over the next 2. So I'm going to repeat this pattern for round 7 all the way around. 4 single crochets and then a single crochet decrease until we get back to our starting point. Alright, I've come to the end of round 7. Now your last stitch should have been a decrease, and you should have 60 stitches now. So we're going to go ahead and end by slip stitching into our first single crochet, and that will end round 7. And I'm going to go ahead and tie off and change yarns. Now rounds 8, 9, and 10 are the repeat rounds of the hat. So we're going to be doing repeating rounds 8, 9, and 10. So we're going to start on round 8, which I'm going to switch back to my multi-collared yarn. Let me clip up a few of these tails so they're just not hanging around and getting in the way of things. There we go. Okay, so we got 60 stitches. Round 8 starts our repeat round. So I'm going to go ahead and start. What you want to do is find the middle of your V-stitch from this row up here. The stitch that goes into the middle of it, or try your best. So here's the double crochet. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact. Here's a single crochet on top of that double crochet. So I'm going to start in that one. Remember, it doesn't have to be exact. Just kind of get it the best that you can. No one's really going to notice because it is the top of your hat. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and pull our yarn through. And we're going to chain 1. Now we're going to do a double, or we're going to do a puffed V-stitch into that same stitch, just like normal. So that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch. We'll go ahead and do our puffed V-stitch there. Oops. Like that, and then we're going to chain 1. Okay, so from now on when we do our puff stitch rows, instead of skipping 1, we're going to be skipping 2. So I'm going to skip 2 now, and in the next stitch I'm going to do a puffed V-stitch. So no more skipping 1 when we do the puff stitch rows. We're skip 2 now. So there's 1. And there's puff V-stitch, chain 1. So I'm going to skip 2. There's 1, 2, and puff V-stitch into the next. Now this row of puff V-stitches will not probably won't. It's not going to line up with your previous row at the top, but that's okay. Like I said, you know, you're not going to be able to see those top stitches. So, well, not that well. So it doesn't really matter. They're going to line up from now on. Chain 1. Skip 2, 1, 2, puff V-stitch into the next, and this is what I'm going to do for round 8. Remember, round 8 is one of the repeat rounds. So I'm putting a puff V-stitch, and then I am chaining 1 and skipping 2. Chain 1, skip 2, puff V-stitch into the next, and I'm going to repeat this all the way around until I get to the end of round 8. Just like that. And you can see it's kind of starting to form a hat. Don't worry if it doesn't look like a hat, because it takes a while before it starts to look normal. So, because I have a lot of people say they start and they get like 5 or 6, 7 rows in, and they say it don't look like a hat, so they quit. Don't do that. Finish the pattern out, follow along with me, and I promise that it's going to look like a hat at the end. So just continue doing your puff V-stitch, skip 2, puff V-stitch, skip 2, make sure you chain 1 in between the puff V-stitches. Okay, so I have made it to the end of round 8, and I went ahead and slip stitched. I had 2 stitches left to skip, so I skipped those. Remember, you have to chain 1 after your last puff V-stitch. And I went ahead and slip stitch into the top of my first puff stitch. So at the end of round 8, you should have a total of 20 puff stitches. So now we're going to start round, I went ahead and tied off because I'm going to switch colors. I'm going to go ahead and start round 9. Remember, rounds 8, 9, and 10 are the repeat rounds. So I'm going to start round 9 with my black in the same color, or in the same spot that I just slip stitched into on top of this first puff. So I'm going to go in, draw up a loop, and chain 1. Okay, so I am going to go back into that same stitch and double crochet. Now I'm going to double crochet into the chain 1 space of the next puff V-stitch, like that. And now we're going to do a double crochet decrease. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the top of the next puff. Yarn over, go into the top of it, draw up a loop. we're going to yarn over and go through the first 2 loops. Now we're going to go into the chain space between the 2 puffs. So yarn over, go into that chain space between the 2 puffs, draw up a loop, yarn over and go through the first 2, and then yarn over and go through all 3 loops. So that took 2 stitches and made it into 1. That way there's not such a gap there in between your chain 1 space and your double crochets. So we're going to repeat that again. So I am going to do a double crochet into the top of my next puff, a double crochet in the chain 1 space of my puff V-stitch, and then a double crochet decrease over the next 2 spots, which is on top of this puff and this chain space here. So we yarn over, go into top of the puff, draw up a loop, and yarn over and go through the first 2 loops, yarn over and go into this chain space, draw up a loop, yarn over and go through the first 2 loops, and yarn over and go through all 3. And I'm going to repeat that again. I'm going to double crochet into my next puff, double crochet into the chain space of the puff V-stitch, and double crochet decrease over the next 2 spots, which is on top of this puff and this chain space here. So yarn over, go into the top of the puff, drop a loop, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, go into that chain space, drop a loop, yarn over, go through the first 2, and yarn over and go through all 3. And I'm going to repeat that pattern all the way around for round 9 until I get back to my starting point. Okay, so I made it to the end of round 9. My last stitch was a decrease, and I'm going to go ahead and end round 9 by slip stitching into my first double crochet. I'm not going to change colors. I'm going to start round 10. Round 10 is a chain 1. You should have 60 stitches there at the end of round 9. So round 10, we chain 1, and we're going to go back into that same stitch in single crochet. And now we're just going to work a round of 1 single crochet in every stitch. Just like that. So round 10 is really easy. 1 single in every stitch until you make it back to your starting point. Okay, so I've made it to the end of round 10, 60 stitches. Go ahead and end by slip stitching into your first single crochet. Tie that off, and I'm going to repeat now rounds 8, 9, and 10. So I'm going to start around 8 again, which is the puffed V-stitch row. So go ahead and show you how I started it one more time. You want to start it where you're kind of in the middle of the puff stitch, if you can. You know, it doesn't have to be exact, but when you look at it here, you see that double crochet, and then there's that single crochet. Kind of start in the single crochet that's on that double crochet that's in the middle of that V-stitch. That way that your puff V-stitches line up, but you know, it's okay if they don't. So I'm going to go ahead and start there. Chain 1. Now remember, I'm on round 11, but I'm only repeating round 8. So I'm going to puff V-stitch into that same spot. Chain 1, skip 2, skip, skip, and in your next stitch you puff V, and if you look, it will wind up in the middle of this puff V. It should, but like I said, if it, you know, it should wind up there or close to it. Chain 1, skip 2, skip, skip. The next one you can see is going to be in the middle of that puff V stitch down here. So if you're keeping your puffy stitches lined up now, you know you're doing it correctly. So what I'm going to do is repeat rounds 8, 9, and 10. Remember, at the end of round 8, you'll have 20 of these puffed V stitches. And then at the end of round 9 and 10, you'll have 60 stitches. And we're going to repeat that for as long as we want the hat to be. Now, if you want a slouchy, you make more rows. If you want a regular fitting hat, you make less rows. Now, I will let you know here in just a second how many total rows I do. Remember, we're repeating rounds 8, 9, and 10. I will put a little bit of a brim on the hat, so I will cut a little bit shorter than what I normally would, but I'm just going to continue this repeat for a few more rounds, 8, 9, and 10. I'm going to show you what I did to finish my hat. So I did a total of 19 rows. That is starting from row 1, way up here, all the way down. So I ended, my 19th row was the end of the repeat. It was a row of single crochet. And then I did 2 more rows of black, 1 single crochet in every stitch. So I had 60 single crochets in each of those 2 rows. So that made row 19, 20, and 21. And for row 22, I did another row of single crochet, and I just did it in the colored. Now, the colored yarn. Now you can adjust your brim to your liking. Mine's more of a slouchy style hat. Let me give you a measurement on it. It is about almost 12, 11 3/4 inches. Now, if you want to eliminate this brim, by all means you could do that. You could cut it off here. If you want to make it a regular hat that will just fit you regular, you know, you could cut it off up here. You know, the sky's the limit. You can adjust it to use these stitches in this manner and make it as long or as short as, you know, to fit you. And then I added a palm. That's it. So thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. Even if you didn't make this and you still watched it, I really super appreciate that. But if you did make this, post a picture on Instagram, tag me in it. I'd really like to see it. Or anything you crochet, come follow me on Instagram, tag me in it, show me what you made. Any cool new yarn that you found, tag me in it. I like to look at yarn. Also, anything yarn related, even knitting, tag me in some knitting that you did. Machine knit, anything that has to do with yarn. Go to Instagram, follow me, tag me in it. I love yarn. I am a yarny hardcore. Give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't forget. Or subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss any of my notifications. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a good day. Love you all. Stay safe.